All right, welcome everybody to episode number 11 of Vintage Spotlight Podcast. My name is Jeremy Lee. I'm joined by Mr. Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect. Leighton, it's good to be back here in the studio with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, and it's great to be back in the saddle, Jeremy, and looking forward to today's episode.
And I got to tell you, Leighton, we just spent about an hour talking about what we were going to talk about, and it's so much fun talking about the Vintage Spotlight, talking about vintage cards, the vintage community, everything that we enjoy in this hobby, that I'm ramped up for this episode. How about you?
I'll tell you, when we sit down to prepare this, it's so much fun because I feel like you and I could just BS for hours. I think it's part of the reason why we're not allowing ourselves to do this weekly, because we wouldn't get any work done.
That's right. We'd spend 6 hours planning, 6 hours recording, and we wouldn't see our families or run our businesses. So no. Exactly. Well, we do have some great topics today that I think we're passionate about, all of them. You'll see that in the next 45 minutes or so. But let's jump in, Leighton. And I'm going to actually turn it over to you to introduce the first topic that we're going to dive into. So why don't you go ahead and let us know what we're thinking.
Absolutely. So shout out to our mutual friend, Dan, from Dan's Vintage Baseball PC on YouTube. It's a really fun channel. Dan's an avid collector. Well, Dan recently had an episode all about eye appeal, but he introduced some new terminology, and he's calling it own appeal. And I wanted to discuss that today, the whole eye appeal notion versus own appeal. And when you first hear it, it almost sounds like a little hokey because you're like, what does that even mean? The words are kind of similar, but I think I can explain it, hopefully, as clearly as Dan did. And I want to discuss it with you, Jeremy, and kind of get your thoughts on it as well.
Let's go ahead. Let's do it.
So Dan, as well as a lot of us vintage collectors, Jeremy, yourself included, as well as me, realized that not every graded 5 of a 1952 Topps card is created equal, and so on and so forth. And so the notion of eye appeal certainly wasn't invented by you, me, Dan, or really anyone else that I know of, but we're all kind of subscribing to that way of collecting, even if it's just for ourselves. However, we all have a finite budget, right? Maybe we have a different amount in our budgets, but all of us do have a limit. And when Dan was talking about eye appeal versus own appeal, admittedly, I didn't really know what direction he was taking. But when he brought up an E92 Christy Mathewson, which is the Dockman set, which is kind of a tough set, he said, I'd love to own one that's got great eye appeal. I'd love to own one that looks a little bit nicer. However, I also just want to own one. And so when he showed off his example, he was kind of putting it down. He's like, it's missing the corners. It's certainly not high eye appeal, but he's like, I'm very proud to own it. And I know what he means, because we've all been in a spot where we want to own, let's say, a nicer looking example of that card, but we just can't stomach it, afford it, or anything and everything in between. And so I'm curious, Jeremy, have you ever utilized, without maybe knowing it, that type of strategy when collecting?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thought experiment to go through, because I think we're conditioned to want to own items that we like to look at that are somewhat clean, maybe. And so, you asked the question to me and I think about it, and I don't know that I've ever purchased a card that was, say, a beater just because I wanted to own a copy of it. I'm not somebody who will purchase a card and have it as a placeholder until a better copy comes around or until I can upgrade. I also don't find myself chasing super rare vintage cards that are kind of outside the norm, like oddball type of set cards. So where oftentimes there might only be 8 known examples, or that, or even if it's a very, very expensive card, like I'm not going to purchase a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle just to own one that looks like it's been scrunched up and flattened out and thrown into a slab. I'd rather wait for a copy for me. So I certainly respect and understand the concept of own appeal, because sometimes you just want to own a copy of the card. But there is a threshold of condition or enjoyment for me where it's like, no, I'm going to hold off even though I'd like to own the card. But what does come to mind is I remember going back several years before Nat Turner even acquired and became the owner of Collectors and PSA, he purchased the Michael Jordan PMG green in an altered PSA slab. And I remember him saying, I think he came on my show, he said, I just wanted to own a copy of the card. And I'm seeing more and more collectors. I know it's funny, we're talking about vintage cards, but I notice it a lot in the 90s insert collector community, where they don't care if a Rubies or a PMG is a PSA 4 or 5. There's only 50 or 100 of them that have ever been made. How many of them are actually in the float? How many are actually known to still exist? But people just want to own a copy of it. And I love that approach. But let's face it, a PSA 5 or 6 of a 1997 Rubies or PMG is still a pretty well-presented card. You know, they're not that bad compared to, we're going to look at a card a little bit later in this episode that is a complete disaster, but it completely fits into the own appeal category that Dan coined. And I said to Dan the other day, I said, you know, I'm going to be using the term own appeal quite a bit moving forward. I said, I just want to make sure, did you get it? Is that your term or did you find it somewhere else? Because I just want to make sure I'm giving proper attribution. He said, as far as I know, I came up with it. I said, that's great. Then I'm gonna refer to you when I use the term. I love the terminology, Leighton. There's another term that recently came out on Sports Cards Live on just 2 nights ago that we may or may not mention tonight. But yeah, I can say for myself, I respect own appeal, and I'd rather layer own appeal with eye appeal together. And I've been successful with a couple of big pickups for my collection over the last year, where I can now own a 1933 Babe Ruth number 144 in a low grade, and I own a PSA 1 of it, but it's a beautiful one. So I have eye appeal and own appeal covered in one fell swoop. And to me, that's winning when it comes to the collection, my personal collection.
I think you pointed out some really interesting things there, and I'd love to hear from the audience to get your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that eye appeal versus own appeal is only limited to vintage? Or, as we were talking about, you're thinking about the modern arena, and you're right, Jeremy, some of those starred rubies, PMGs, 24 carats, etc., they are so rare that folks don't really care about the grade at all, and they just want to own the card. But that makes me think of Dan and his E92 Document Mathewson, because basically what Dan's saying in a nutshell is that, hey, if I was rich, similar to me, I wouldn't sell any of my cards, and I'd buy all the best examples I could afford. But Dan might be a little bit more realistic than myself. And so Dan has figured out, at least for the E92 Document Mathewson in this case, that he's not going to likely go after a $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000 version. He's going to go after that couple $1,000 version just to say that he owns it. And I can tell you myself, at least in the early days of collecting T206s, Jeremy, especially with the rare backs, I would take, you know, any kind of version of a tougher back as long as the back was intact. I didn't care if there was a spot of paper loss on the front or it was heavily creased, like the card we're going to talk about just in a little bit in the PSA 1 holder. You know, but that being said, I don't know if I could definitively tell you when I'm going to go after a card and only focus on eye appeal, and then when I'm going to go after a card and only focus on own appeal. And with the National upcoming, I'd love to hear from folks in the audience here who are watching. Can you let us know, is there a definitive example of the National and the shopping that you're going to do this summer of when own appeal is going to be enough for you, no matter what you see at the show? Can you think of an example for yourself, Jeremy, of something this summer that you're targeting that's a toughie, that you might take a lesser grade or that matter, an authentic, just to say you have in your collection, your PC?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I am okay with an authentic card in my collection now. I'm even willing to add authentic with evidence of trimming card into my collection if it's a card that I just think is beautiful. And I would rather have authentic with evidence of trimming than a complete disaster of a card. But that, you know, that's just, I'd be okay with it. It would always, I would always have in the back of my mind that, listen, okay, this card was trimmed, so it's altered, and that isn't ideal. But I'm also not in a position to maybe buy a copy that is as beautiful without having trimming. So there are a few cards that are on my hit list, not just for the National, but for the next couple of years. You know, a beautiful 1933 Lou Gehrig, number 92. I want one of those. But but I don't want it tattered. I want it to have eye appeal. So I'm willing to take a PSA 1 with a pinhole, or a PSA 1 with a little bit of paper loss on the back, but I'd rather it not be trimmed. So, I am not willing to buy a card just to own it if it's an important card to me. I don't know. I find myself struggling right now, Leighton, because I don't think that own appeal is ever going to be my MO in the hobby. I'm all about eye appeal. Eye appeal is number one for me, and it hasn't been for my whole collecting life, but it is right now, has been for a while. And so when I'm window shopping at the National 6 weeks from now, I'm going to be looking for, there's 3 cards at the top of that list, 3 major cards. There's the Gaudi Lou Gehrig, there's a T206 Ty Cobb, although I am open to a few alternatives there, potentially. And then there's the 41 Play Ball DiMaggio, which is number 1 on my list. That card, I'm very specific on what I acquire, and it's all about eye appeal. I do not want to own that card if it doesn't have the certain criteria met that I've set out for it. I want it to look really nice with the other PSA 1 and 1.5s in my collection that are very strong for the grade. So I think my answer is simply no. I don't have that card. But the other kind of part of your question was on the authentic side. Yeah, authentic, but slabbed authentic only because it wasn't relevant for a number grade. It didn't qualify to have a numerical grade because it might be trimmed or something like that. So would I add a 41 Play Ball DiMaggio that is trimmed into my collection? I might be willing to do that if the price is right and the rest of the card is right as well. I don't want it to be mini. I don't want it to be like another card we're going to look at later on where most of the border is missing. I want it to look like it. I don't know, Leighton, this might be really bad to say, but I want it to look like it isn't trimmed if it is trimmed.
No, it's not bad to say. And I would tell you that, Jeremy, I've been doing this so long. And if this resonates with you, let us know in the comments. I remember when PSA wouldn't even slab an authentic card. So think about how far we've come as a hobby and an industry that now it's not only acceptable, but in some cases, we're kind of talking just a couple of casual collectors here that I would rather have maybe an authentic copy of a certain important card than a lower grade 1, 2, or 3. And I certainly know for myself, it's all about the appeal, like the pack fresh appeal. So in other words, I can tolerate a card that's a little bit smaller if it has that look, that gloss, and it resonates with me. But if a card is just whacked all around and it looks like it's been recycled, maybe even graded 17 times, that's not the same feeling for me. And I would also say this, what's super fun about collecting authentics is a lot of times people, even if it says nothing on it, people definitively feel it's trimmed. Gang, I got news for you. Newsflash here. When they made cards decades ago, it wasn't so exact. Yeah. Meaning some of these cards, they might not actually be trimmed. They were just made small. So what does that mean? Well, just keep it simple. So if the dimensions were 3 by 5, it means it's a fraction short of 3 or a fraction short of 5. But it doesn't mean it was actually done aftermarket. It might have been done at the factory. So to me, that is the gem of an eye appeal card I want. So much so that I might even crack it out and resubmit it because it looks like it might be full size. So that is kind of the example you're talking about, Jeremy. And that might be every vintage collector's dream. Yeah.
How does that reconcile with the sort of min size not met label that you get back from PSA sometimes?
It's a great question, Jeremy. So to be clear, because we do have that happen sometimes they will submit a card and will definitively say it is either trimmed or recolored, or as you said, min size. You can have a min size card, hold it as authentic. But, and I don't know PSA's rule for this, I don't believe every time that a card is graded PSA authentic, it does not say in the title on the flip why it has been graded as such. Right. So if I could offer a suggestion to PSA, let's try to standardize it moving forward. If it's trimmed, say trimmed. If it's small, then say N9 small. If it's because there's been recoloring, then say that. So there's this little bit of mystery that's going on out there for the Cards and Authentic Holders journey, but you bring up a great point. And that the closer it looks to full size, don't make yourself crazy. It may not be trimmed. It might have just come out of the factory like that, but it still looks gorgeous.
Right. And I didn't know that they will slab an N9 min size card. So
as authentic, they will.
As authentic, that's wonderful. Like that to me, that's the sweet spot for value. Unfortunately, the secondary market doesn't understand what authentic means in a lot of cases, in those cases.
Well, that's why I'd like to see them standardize it. I think that would be nice.
Because that would probably that would hurt us from a buying perspective of those cards, but it would increase the value of those cards, because now, listen, this is still a card that is as it was when it was pack pulled. It's just min size. Well, then why even have min size if it's a pack pulled card? Like, that doesn't,
these are all really interesting suggestions and points. And I just want to give a shout out to our mutual friend Matty C and his new website, iappealinc.com, because, as we both know, Jeremy, as we're both a little bit involved in the project, it's going to be a wonderful place for a collector, an investor, or a dealer to have some of these questions answered. So if you're sitting there and you're like at a card show, the National, for example, right, this summer, and you've had a 53 tops mantle on your list for the longest of time, and you see, for argument's sake, a 3, and you're like, oh my God, it's dead nut centered, it's got beautiful gloss, there's just a little bit of issue on the back, maybe a light wrinkle or a crease. I know myself, I cannot wait to download the app. I think that they're going to be releasing it on 7/7. And I think what's going to happen is collectors such as us, Jeremy, are going to take the example we're looking at, much of the way we do right now with Card Ladder or VCP, but we're going to use iappealinc.com to say, is this mantle really the nicest 3 out there? I love, love, love his mission behind his website. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm a big fan of what Matty C is doing. I'm a big fan of Matty C and his account on Instagram. And now with the launch of iAppeal Inc., I think what it really does is democratizes the judgment of a card's appeal, because obviously it's called iAppeal Inc. And, listen, there are so many cards that we throw around the term undergraded without really understanding what we're saying. And I'm probably guilty of this too. But I don't necessarily think that, the cards are undergraded simply because the standards aren't always adhered to in the grading room. It's an inconsistent adherence to the standard. So there are times when cards are undergraded, but when the card appears to be grossly undergraded, it may not be undergraded. There may be a technical flaw in the card that causes it to go all the way down from what might otherwise be a 7 or an 8, all the way down to a 1. And is that an undergraded card? I don't think it's undergraded technically. According to the standards, it's properly graded. But from an iAppeal perspective, it's not fairly graded. All right. So speaking of iAppeal, Leighton, why don't we talk about iAppeal as it relates to the ultimate card in our hobby, the T206, Honus Wagner, the Honus Wagner. A couple of examples have recently come to market, one of which has been completed and one of which ends this Saturday on Golden Auctions. Now, I've looked at both of these. We spoke about the one that sold was it last month or the month before on Mile High?
Very recent, yeah.
Very recently on Mile High. I'll share the copy on our screen right now. This one right here, exceptionally attractive, Sweet Caporal reverse, Honus Wagner authentic restored copy, just sold for $1.98 million. $20,000 to $50,000 more than the time it sold previously. This copy, it does look different to me. You can tell it is restored. Obviously, the borders are mostly missing. It's been cropped, if you will, but it presents pretty well. And for an authentic, obviously restored, trimmed copy, just shy of $2 million is a pretty healthy price for that card. Now, conversely, we also have the Connecticut Wagner right here. selling on Golden this Saturday, currently at $3.2 million, which is it's actually, Leighton, it's at 3.9 million with the buyer's premium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So literally double or almost double.
So here we have a authentic PSA 1 card. Again, just to contrast it, there's the authentic, not restored copy without a numerical grade. $1.98 million, 3.9 and counting. Now, Leighton, when we look at these two cards, we have to consider both technical grade and eye appeal. One does not get a technical grade, one of the copies. This one does. Eye appeal wise, listen, this copy, like, his head looks nice here. You can see what he looks like, but the card overall, this thing's a bit of a disaster, don't you think?
I would use the word tattered.
Tattered. It's tattered. It has a lot of issues going on condition wise.
And you point out the face, but when you blow it up, Jeremy, and sorry to interrupt, but there is that nasty line between his eyes, and I don't love that either.
Yeah, there's a line going through his eyes, coming down his cheek. You've got a big chunk of the paper missing right there. Also, you're right. It's not just a chunk. It looks like one of those, those images you'll see time lapsed of like lightning throughout the sky, and it's like everywhere. It's a night's worth of lightning in a bad storm. This is like all these creases and folds and bends. This thing looks like, literally, Leighton, it looks to me like it's falling apart. Like if I
think you're describing it accurately. And then also, if you take a peek at the W and the A in Wagner on the bottom on the nameplate, it's really not clean.
No, it's not. And look at the corners. I mean, they're completely worn off.
Correct.
At least it's uniform rounding, which I like that aspect of it. The centering is pretty good still. I mean, let's call it what it is. There are a few positives about this card. Let's have a quick look.
And it's a Wagner. Back. It's got a clean back, clean enough.
But this is not a pretty copy of the card, I would have to say. It's not a pretty copy of the card, but the people that are buying this card are more interested in own appeal over eye appeal, because this is one of those cards where universally, I don't know if there might be, maybe 5 people on the planet that would pass on this and wait for a better copy. So, own appeal, eye appeal, we've circled back to that now, Leighton. If we had to choose a copy to own, would you rather own this card for $4 million, which is basically, like I said, we're at 3.9, we're at $3,904,000 right now. And the next bid is going to put this over $4 million. Would you rather own this for $4 million, or would you rather own this for $2 million? This card, I look at it, it looks like it's gem mint compared to the last one. So where do you fall, Leighton? Which one would you rather own?
Great question. And before I answer, I'd love to hear in the comments of the folks who are watching and enjoying the Vintage Spotlight episode 11. What do you folks think? Because I don't think it's an easy answer, but I'll go with my gut, Jeremy, and it usually serves me well. I like the authentic restored example more. It also happens to be $2 million less. And if you were forced to have to choose one of the two, but then also take the $2 million if you save it and still buy more cards, there is 100% no doubt in my mind that I would buy this example. And you pointed out on the other example, the PSA 1, that the back isn't bad. But Jeremy, no one's buying the T206 Wagner for the back. And so, I just wanted to say that although the restored is certainly going to bother a lot of people, if you're buying this to show off to your friends on the yacht because you're a yacht guy, I think that people are going to look at that and they're not going to even ask you about the restored. They're going to say, wow, this is one of the world's most valuable cards. What's it worth? That's pretty much it.
Yeah. One of the issues I have with the restored copy is that top border, the way it waves up and down. That to me is the worst aspect of it. Even the left side, well, all the sides.
I'd ask you this though, Jeremy. I'm curious. So keep in mind, this is restored. Not for nothing. If they already did all this extensive work, straighten out the top. It would look a lot better, right?
Yeah.
It's already trimmed. I agree with you. I actually think it's an eyesore. Like I can envision putting my finger on it, and I can tell a lot of times, right? Is a card cut properly? If you see a little bit, you just run your finger on it, and that is very obvious. If it was me doing the work, I would have made it more rectangular and straight.
Right, right.
But it sounds like you would have done the same thing too.
I would not touch this card with anything other
Fair
than
enough.
a glove. So yeah, I would never do work on this card or any card for that matter. But yeah, the one response to that, Leighton, that I was thinking when you were saying that is that if you were to trim that top border, you're basically removing a small percentage of $2 million worth of cardboard. So is it better to just have that excess cardboard there, or is it better to trim it off? Like you're shrinking the pie.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but Jeremy, you're right. I love pizza. And if you say, you're going to just trim off some, you get less pizza, right?
Right.
So
right.
I understand what you mean. You're not going to be eating the Honus Wagner. Listen, as you said to start, I don't think I would have restored it myself, but I didn't ask for it to be restored, and it is in as-is condition. And if you had to say to me what I would choose, I don't really care that the other one is not restored. I just don't like the look of it. But I would say the story is incredible. Yeah. So is the story worth $2 million to you? Not to me.
Well, right. And so I just want to point out, I think that Golden did a great job here on the description. And I say that because I didn't read the whole thing. I skimmed it, but it's super long. They start talking about a description of the card. There is a ton of information here. History of the Connecticut Wagner, this exact copy, origin of the T206 Wagner. You get a whole story, pricing trends and investment potential. And then they go through history of other cards, other Wagners that have sold, condition-related issues, the aesthetics, closing comments. There's a ton of information. I don't know that I've really ever seen a description this long on an auction before. So I think
that certainly reeks of Joe Tomasulo, who now works at Golden and is known for writing these diatribes. And so I think that when you're talking about a $4 million card, there's you can share as much information as possible, and obviously it's never going to be enough. I do like sharing the history of the card. I would say this though, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Jeremy, and audience as well. Let us know. What if this card had sold first? I 100% think the other one would have sold for more.
Yeah.
The person who bought that card for almost $2 million must be feeling pretty good right now. I would be.
Oh, I think so too. So, you asked the question of me earlier, is there a card that I would buy just to own it regardless of its condition? And I'll tell you, looking at this card, this might be the only one that would qualify for me. Again, I don't know, Leighton. I might choose this over the restored copy because the restored copy does look weird to me. I do like this in its natural form, but I don't have any cards in my collection that look as bad as this condition-wise, and I don't think I ever will. Now, that's just the way I'm collecting, and I will hold out for let's face it, we're looking at a Wagner card right now, but there are other cards that are graded a 1 that are 1% of the price, if not less, or way less than that. There are common T206s, other pre-war cards that look like this. They're in 1 slabs where you could find another copy of that same card in a 1 slab, and it can be a lot nicer. It might cost you a little bit more, but it's probably not going to cost you way, 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 way more. So for me, yeah, I would not own this card. I would not own a card in this condition unless it was a T206 Honus Wagner.
I'd be happy with either. If I had to choose the two, and let's just say I had a bigger budget and I had a $10 million budget just to deploy on cards, I think I'd still buy the restored copy for half the price. And to be fair, if I'm saying I'm not keeping the card, Jeremy, I might literally resell my restored Wagner in a year's time just based on the success of this one.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what would happen now that we're seeing the price on this. And this one is not done. There's still 5 days. Now,
very good point.
There may not be any more bids coming. It may top out at $3.9 million. Or we'll see what happens. What do you think, Leighton? Let's play the game. Do you think it's going to get any more bids in the next 5 days?
No, I don't.
If this card is sitting at the Golden booth at the National, and you can have your picture taken with it, you kind of bet I'm going to go over there and have my picture taken with that Wagner because it is such an elusive card.
Absolutely. You know what I started doing? This is how much of a card nerd I am, Jeremy. So I don't know that I'll be owning a Wagner in this lifetime, or at least a T206 Honus Wagner. Maybe in the next one. But regardless, I've started to curate my photos of any time I've taken one with a Wagner through the years. And I'm trying to figure out what number I can get up to. So I'm hoping there'll be several at the National this summer. And once again, am I collecting them? Am I going to print them out? No, but much in the way that I've seen autograph collecting change. And I recently had Jeff Rosenberg on the road to the National. A lot of folks now, they don't even want the autograph. They just want the picture with the player. I don't know that I need to own a Wagner. I think I just want to take pictures with as many as I can.
Yeah, that certainly resonates with me. I've been doing a lot of player interviews on stage at card shows in Canada at the Expo. And people always say to me, did you get his autograph? It's like, no, I don't need the autograph. I just take a selfie with the player after we do the interview. And that's all I need. I've had that 15-minute experience with the guy. And we had little banter before and after, just private. And that's what's important to me. I don't need to get just like you don't necessarily need to own the card. You're happy having the pictures. It's the experience of being with the card. I can tell you myself, the Cleveland National back in, I don't know if it was 2013, I forget which auction house had two Wagners there, and people were able to have your picture taken. So I have a picture of myself with two Wagners, one in each hand. I think I got one with the oversized one in Chicago a couple years ago. Maybe in 2019, actually.
Oh, that's a great card. Great card.
Yeah.
I think I have a pic with that as well.
I think I have a picture with, I think 4 Wagners I've held in my life.
It's kind of fun to think about it though, right? You're
it's neat.
I'm hoping to get to double digits.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned the Road to the National series. So we're both working with the National, providing and producing some content to just get everybody excited, because the National, I mean, it is our Mecca, Leighton. So you've been doing a few episodes on your Just Collect YouTube channel for the Road to the National. I've got 5 episodes out there already. I'm going to be recording my 6th one. I think my final, I might do a 7th. We'll see. But how have you enjoyed working on this content in partnership with the National Sports Collectors Convention?
I've enjoyed it very much. As you alluded to, it's nice to find out from different points of view what they are looking forward to at the National, what's going on for them. And so I've been kind of peeking on your episodes. I think you're doing a great job. I enjoy that we're both kind of taking this tactical approach. Like, we're not just getting 5 or 6 dealers or 5 or 6 collectors. You got a collector, you got an executive, you got an auction house owner. Things of that nature, I think, are really fun. And so if you haven't already, certainly check out Jeremy's Road to the National. If you wanted to check out the episodes that I'm doing as well, they'll be on my Just Collect YouTube channel. The most recent one I just did was with Chris Ivy from Heritage, and I think it just dropped earlier today. And he was telling me about the Platinumite auction, but in particular, this Babe Ruth pocket watch that's going to sell for about $3 million. And so if you had to say to me, and I'm going to ask you, Jeremy, would you rather have the Babe Ruth pocket watch or either one of those Wagners? I could definitively tell you, I think I've had dreams already about the Babe Ruth pocket watch. So I would choose the Ruth pocket watch. I'm not sure what direction you would go, but man, Heritage has some amazing memorabilia.
I'm taking the Wagner. I'm taking the Wagner. Okay. I'm good with my watch.
Okay.
But I get it. That's a cool piece. It's a cool piece of baseball history, Babe Ruth history, Americana, all those things. So, and maybe some Swiss watchmaking as well, right? So
yeah, I figured I'm like, I'm in the dating world. I would love to take out, like, on the first date, woman asks you, like, what time is it? Oh, pardon me for a second. Let me just shine this right up. What is that? Oh, let me tell you.
Let's ask Babe Ruth what time it is. Right?
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
It's pretty cool. You make me think about collecting memorabilia with that comment, Leighton. Like, a Ty Cobb game used bat versus a Ty Cobb T206 card or whatever card, let's say. I often respond to questions like that by saying, I don't really collect memorabilia. I have 2 or 3 pieces. I'm good. I'm a card guy. That's what I love. That's what I enjoy. So I'm pretty much always going to take the card over the game used bat or the Babe Ruth watch. Some people might think I'm crazy, but I don't collect game used bats. I don't collect game used jerseys. I don't
No,
collect
but look behind you, and you do collect memorabilia. And even though they're card related, you can see that you have an appreciation for memorabilia because you have on your wall these pictures, paintings, etc., of Gretzky, of Russell, etc. And so I think we all kind of find our own path. Oh yeah, look, you got Wilt and Reggie and Dr. J. I mean, what's the dimensions of those, Jeremy?
Oh, good question. I believe they're 12 by 24, 1 foot by 2
Oh, so
foot,
decent size.
They're not tiny by any means.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, they're card related, but they're not really cards.
No, they're not.
It's more of art.
They're wall decorations for me.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm finding these at flea markets. I commission these from one specific artist.
Yeah.
I've got a pair of game used gloves and I've got a game used jersey hanging downstairs. Those are the two pieces of memorabilia I have. But yeah, like I say, I'm a card guy. But listen, that Babe Ruth pocket watch, that's an amazing collectible, amazing piece of history. Very cool.
And that's what you can see at the National. That's the whole point of the road to the National.
Right.
Is whether it be like if you're a card guy, great. Pretend you're not for a day. The things that you're going to see at the National are going to blow your mind.
Yeah. I've enjoyed doing my Road to the National series. I had Dr. Beckett on one of the episodes. I've kind of tried to be well-rounded with the guests.
But you did a great job.
Thank you. A couple of collectors, being Greg from Midlife Cards, Adam Gray, the Real 27 Guys, a collector. I had the president of Upper Deck on, Jason Mosheraw, Brian Dwyer from REA Auctions, Dr. Beckett, of course. And I'm gonna do one or two more, one for sure. And so it's been fun. It's been fun just getting excited. If nothing else, I'm getting excited for the National by doing this.
Absolutely. And I do think, Jeremy, let's be real for a second. We're doing this with the National because we're trying to provide some insight, not to maybe folks who've already been there before, but for folks that are collectors, but they might be on the verge of going. They need a little bit of a push, and they want to hear, like, from behind the scenes, why should I really go to the world's biggest card convention?
That's exactly what the mission of this series is let's talk to the people who are maybe hobby curious, maybe new to the hobby, and they're not sure should they spend the money to go. And at the end of the day, you're going to see amazing things like maybe a Babe Ruth pocket watch, but you're going to meet people, especially if you're a bit of an extrovert, even if you're introverted, you're going to be in a room full of a ton of introverts. And it's a great way to build community and just realize that, you may be collecting by yourself, but you're really not collecting by yourself. And you will see and meet people who are very much like-minded. And, it's a great for it to have a sense of community. This hobby it's a lifestyle. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Collecting is a lifestyle. And I'm getting really excited for the National right now, Leighton. Really excited to
so am I.
And see everything there that I can. But listen, the National 6 weeks away. There's a big event next weekend happening in New York. Fanatics Fest is back. You will be going. I unfortunately will not be there. I was there last year. I have a conflict next weekend. I'm not going to be there, Leighton. So I'll have to wait a few more weeks to see you. But let us know. You are going to Fanatics Fest.
Yes.
What kind of goals do you have in mind for yourself? Will you be exhibiting again like you did last year?
Sure. So I'm going to be exhibiting with a buddy on Friday this year. But the main reason we're not exhibiting over the course of the weekend is really just to preserve our staff, because the National is upcoming and we are a small company and I don't want to run everyone ragged before the show. That being said, I'm happy to run myself ragged as the owner. And so I do have a few goals for the show. Number one is to go and enjoy it. It is a tremendous convention. It is a little bit different than the National. There's a lot of activations from the different leagues. And what I like is, like, even though I'm not really a wrestling fan or a UFC guy, I can walk up to those activations and like get a sense of what's going on. So I very much enjoy that. I'm going to try to take my son on the Saturday. So we're going to see if we can coordinate, because I don't have him this upcoming weekend. But I'm trying to work it out with his mother. And then, of course, I'm going there to buy inventory. And we were talking about this a little bit off air. It's very competitive right now buying graded vintage cards. And so I figured that even if I can go there and pick up a little bit, but network and maybe line up a deal to buy some additional inventory at the National, I'm going for that. And then I'm also going to be producing some content. I don't know what kind of content, but I'm certainly going to capture it. We're actually bringing our video guy with us, and we're just going to try to have a good time.
You mentioned that it's getting difficult to buy vintage graded cards. Now, is that like all vintage graded? Like dirty PSA 3s, dirty SGC 4s? Is it like what where specifically, or if you can you sort of isolate or maybe exclude certain things from that comment? Is all graded vintage hard to buy right now?
Graded vintage stars and Hall of Famers.
Okay.
So commons are much easier to buy. And depending on what time period you're buying the cards from. So in other words, 50s and 60s, there's just a lot more inventory accessible than, for example, tobacco cards. So if you said you wanted to buy T206 Hall of Famers, they're not as readily available as 1958 Topps Baseball Hall of Famers, for example. So I would expect to probably pay a little bit more percentage points closer to what they're worth on tobacco cards versus like a 50s or 60s card. But make no mistake, Jeremy, I'm buying these cards for a few different reasons, right? I'm buying it for inventory. I'm buying it for our Just Collect shop here in Summit, New Jersey. As I mentioned, I do own or partially own a breaking company called Vintage Breaks, and we do participate in repacks. And so these cards, whether it be they're becoming more competitive to buy because of one particular, like repacks, or is it people really are collecting a lot more in volume right now? I don't know. But I can tell you definitively firsthand, as I was mentioning, excuse me, off air, that I'm buying this graded deal coming in of vintage. We were at 85%, and I think we had to put another $1,000 or $2,000 on top to secure it. Now it's very quality vintage. I think there's a coupon Ty Cobb in there, which is going to be a really cool card, and some other fun stuff. But there's nothing like super rare. It's just competitive. We didn't have a discussion as to why, meaning with this gentleman and I. But I think that the industry is hot. People want inventory for whatever reason or another. And so when demand is high and supply is finite, it makes sense that prices are going to go up.
Absolutely. And I think that more and more people are starting to, I might be wrong about this, but my thought is that people are starting to move back in time. There's a lot, it's become very expensive to collect modern day players. Let me ask you, do you think that people are maybe moving backwards in through the decades because cards from 2025, 2024 are becoming more and more expensive, and there may be more value in buying a Mickey Mantle over a Victor Wembanyama?
They're moving backwards for that, Jeremy, but also because they're tired of seeing the instability in the modern.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that we don't know exactly how many new collectors are being created. But when I say new collector, I often talk about someone who's not collecting now and starts collecting. But you bring up a great point. It's also someone who maybe is collecting now, but they collect modern, and they've decided for whatever the reason is to go down that vintage rabbit hole. Once again, increased demand, finite supply, prices go up. So it doesn't really matter where the demand's coming from. But if it's coming from a few areas, make no mistake, prices are going to go up.
You said at the beginning there that people are starting to recognize the instability in the modern. And I think people who've been in this hobby for 10 plus years recognize that modern in its day has always been unstable, because rookie players go through phases, cycles, performing well, performing not so well. So I think what's happening then, if we kind of marry those two ideas, Leighton, is that the hobby has grown so much that the new participants who came in, especially during and since the pandemic, now they have a couple of years under their belt, and they are starting to see what those of us who've been in the hobby our whole lifetimes have been seeing. We've seen these cycles repeat over and over again, and now the new entrants to the hobby have noticed that as well, and they're kind of catching on, and they're saying, listen, there's more value for my dollar, less risk for my dollar if I start to go back into the history of this sports. Now, saying that, I just hope that those people truly enjoy those cards so that they don't get tired of them and say, well, I never saw Mickey Mantle play, so why am I collecting Mickey Mantle? Well, you don't have to have seen him play to enjoy collecting his cards. I just hope that these people I just hope they're not chasing the dollar, and I hope that they're chasing the enjoyment of the hobby by being a participant in it and owning these cardboard pieces that we absolutely love and get so much joy from.
Yeah, listen, great points, Jeremy. I wanted to just throw something out there, super cute. So I was celebrating Father's Day with my son yesterday, and he gave me a Father's Day card that he hand wrote. And as he's done in the past, he talks about some of the things that he likes doing with me, like playing baseball and playing tennis. And I thought this was adorable. He wrote on the card that he enjoys opening his packs of One Piece with me.
Oh.
And it may not be sports cards, but it certainly did bring some goosebumps to me. And I hope that if you're going to be going to the National this summer, that you're able to bring your son, your daughter, your friend, so you can have that experience with someone together. It's a tremendous, tremendous convention, and it goes well beyond the actual just cards and memorabilia itself. So Jeremy and I, of course, hope to see all of you in Chicago.
Yes, we certainly do. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Look forward to seeing you again, Leighton. Can't wait to peruse your inventory at the Just Collect booth. I'm sure it'll be wonderful as always. You always have unique, rare pieces. And I like that your inventory changes show to show. I know that I'm not going to see the same cards that I saw last year at the National. Maybe a few, but not all, that's for sure. So what do you think? Should we wrap this one up?
I think so. I had a great time today, and I hope you folks who are watching and listening are enjoying it as well.
Yeah, guys, thank you everybody for joining us here on the Vintage Spotlight podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or you are listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you do get your podcasts. Also, check out Leighton's podcast, Trading Card Therapy, one of my favorites in the rotation. You can check out my podcast and YouTube channel, Sports Cards Live. That's where you'll find my Road to the National series. You'll find Leighton's on Just Collect YouTube channel and podcast. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again sooner than we did this time.